in no time at all, the whole GDP had just dropped by 60%. The lights went out, the water stopped running. It happened really, really, really fast. And in that period, the average Cuban lost about 20 pounds. And fortunately, though, that they were in a tropical climate, and there were enough people with the old skills. They had completely sacrificed everything, though, to grow sugar to sell to the Soviet Union. So they'd lost a lot, but they had enough people and enough seeds. But it does take a little, it takes some months, it takes some time to get things going. But in any time of crisis, backyard food production is the thing that everybody reverts to, just because your government's not going to help you.
Hey, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending your valuable time right here today. The Adapt 2030 channel. Marjory Wildcraft joins me once again. It does seem like the time is ever more, could I use the word urgent? But it seems like there's definitely been a step up in knock, knock, knock on the door of you needing to get your preps and skills in order, whether that be canning or freezing or drying, or even learning how to grow foods. You know, what we're seeing tick off around the world, I just personally don't see it as a genie going back in the bottle, at least this time around. It's definitely got to run its course, and it has to get to the large, and then it may shrink back down again. But in terms of just turning that off and then everything goes back to normal next week, I just don't see it. I see disruption in oil, perhaps. I see higher oil prices, and that means higher food prices. And to preface this, last week I did a video, and somebody had a tweet, and they were complaining that they spend $90 on groceries. And I looked, and it was like a little handful of stuff. But 50% of what was in there, it was like some shallot onions, some cucumbers, tomatoes. They were complaining about, I just spent $90 for this. I'm like, you could have spent $2.50 for a seed pack and grown, what half of your food cost, which I was sitting on the table there at $90, could have been grown by yourself, even if you had limited space. So these are the kind of things we wanted to cover today. What if you have limited space? Can you maybe lease, I wouldn't say lease, or ask to use somebody, neighbor, maybe their yard to grow something in if they don't want to do the work, like you don't have the space, but somebody 25 feet away, or a 10-minute walk or 5-minute walk down the block has land for you to use. Can you use that? Can you work out an agreement with them? Hey, I'll work in, grow the food and give you some. And as long as I can, keep the food here. There's a lot of things to talk about. So Marjory, I'm so glad you're here, because it does seem like the world has just, stepped up plus one or two, maybe.
It's, we all knew, right? Like we've all been waiting for some big event. They're going to have some big event to blame everything else on, right? Like the what is it, 800 billion that the bankers are underwater for, the unrealized losses. And then there's the food supply, which you have been so brilliantly reporting on, I should say the destruction of the food supply. So there's that going on. That's already hitting, and it's just going to get worse. How many other things, like what are the bankers? There was just an article recently, they quietly fired 20,000 people. Oh, they call it layoff. They laid off 20,000 people this year. Then there's the trucking industry that's going under. United Auto Workers still, it's just everywhere. It's just happening. And then the whole Hamas Israel thing. This is what it's going to get into. That's going to get real. All the stuff we've been talking about for months or years. It's now happening.
Canada hopes to boost regulation on natural health products, otherwise known as supplements. This stretches across the border from Canada and the United States, both. And have you heard about nicotinamide mononucleotide, NMN? It's a derivative of vitamin B niacin, a precursor to NAD+, a compound for muscle regeneration, metabolism, and energy production in your body. And as we navigate into this grand solar minimum, food shortages, economic shifts, and our health are paramount. And this represents a tool in the adaptation toolkit, offering benefits like energy enhancement and anti-aging. But the FDA's potential reclassification threatens this access. We're all going to have to navigate the future with the changes. Give Black Forest NMN a try. Remember, prepping out Two is one and one is none. Lucky, buy two, get one completely free, which makes it three. Click on that link in the description box below. And now on with the video.
And food, I've spent a lot of, well, 20 years in the survival and preparedness space, read pretty much every book you can think of and interviewed all kinds of collapse survivors. Every single one of them, yeah, they talk about, yeah, you do, you better work on defense and have, good ability to defend yourself. And yeah, medicine almost becomes unavailable, so you need to know about that. But the biggest thing they all complained about or talked about, or the biggest impact, was the lack of ability to eat. Like food becomes the number one thing on top of everything else that's going on. And the cool thing is, though, is you're pointing out in the intro, you can grow it. Like you can do this in some dirt, and you can produce a lot of food. Anyway, so why I'm going on about that is I've been keenly aware that there's a psyop against growing food. Like every movie you look at, I just watching a Netflix series with a friend, and there's one of the episodes, it's all about this dumb farmer, right? To be a farmer, you need, there is no such thing as a dumb farmer, I promise you, right? Or the only time you see people growing food, it's because they're desolate, or, it's like, no, that's not at all true. It's actually like the most pleasurable and wonderful activity that you can be involved with. It's been this whole, what have I been programmed with, right? And the same thing goes with growing food. Like, what have you been programmed with?
Yeah, it's easier to get it at a supermarket. You need to live in a neighborhood. Food's dirty because it has dirt on it, and you could possibly get worms or tapeworms or whatever, ringworms, by walking around with bare feet in your front yard. You always have to have shoes on. Like, those are the kind of things now that you can't grow your own food because it hasn't been inspected by the USDA. And even if you wash it, you might not get all the microbes off, and you might get sick from that because you grew it in your own yard. You can only trust after it goes through a sterilizing factory, whether it be with UV radiation or whether it be with, some sort of, let's say chlorine water spray to make sure that all the bacteria is off it. That's what we're programmed with. And, you could probably attest and, go rant on this further back, but, tell us about the victory gardens, because here's what my recollection is. My grandparents, still, when I was a kid and we'd go over there every summer, they had a massive garden. This thing was like at least half an acre. They had massive, but they were coming out of World War II. They remember that. They kept their garden going because they had 5 acres. And they were telling me that at least minimum 40% of everything was grown at the farm. And then if you would incorporate like the larger farms that actually had cattle and everything, it was closer to 60%. So 40% of what could be grown for you and your family to eat right literally at your doorstep. And then if you needed something larger, like, a cow, you might cow share with 4 people and everybody get a quarter of a carcass or something. But within that, 25, 30-mile range, 60% of everything you needed was produced right there. And it was forced by the government at that time because of rationing and the war effort. But after that, how quickly did they get us into supermarkets? And, it's too much work, costs so much. It's way easier to just buy it at the store. Now, I'm sure it was in the 50s and 60s, far cleaner food than we have today, minus the DDT. But, what about victory gardens? Can you fill me in a little bit about what you know and what was produced and kind of the yields and that sort of thing on the victories?
That's actually a really, really inspiring story, because that was a big push in World War II for the victory gardens. And in 1 year, 22 million novice American gardeners produced 40% of the produce that this country, well, this country is a company.
It is a company.
Yeah, that wasn't a Freudian slip. It was the truth. Inc. Yeah, the United States Inc. 40%, like novice gardeners, 22 million of them in the first year produced that. It was just a huge push. But actually, the victory garden movement started in the early 1900s, just prior to World War I, when there were some food riots going on here in the U.S. The food prices were going crazy. We're getting into a wartime. And it was a civilian-led, it was led by the people. I can't remember the gentleman's name who was the spearheading that. And he just said, hey, look, this is what we need to do. Instead of rioting about food, we need to start growing food. So the victory gardens actually go way, way back beyond World War II. Yeah, and I mean, I think to me, that is the whole saving grace, that you can produce your own food and your own medicine and a whole bunch of other things without a military governmental institutional complex. And you don't need it at all. And in fact, the stuff they're producing now, we used to say, oh, be a perimeter shopper, right? Like, just don't go even in that store at all. Like, there's nothing in there of nutritional value. It really isn't. And it's astonishing. I don't know if you've ever seen that chart by August Dunning. I might have to get it to you and see if you can insert it later or something. But he's showing the nutrient density of the foods from like 1900 to 2000, and it's just going down, 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 down. And then he's showing the amount of diseases like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, going up, 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 up. And then especially it like really jumps up once they started using, GMOs, or when they started really getting aggressive with like Roundup or the other chemicals and stuff. So, even if we weren't talking about World War III, on the brink of World War III, you need to be growing your own food. I can give you another reason why. I used to host all these homegrown food summits, which I may do again. It's a lot of fun. The classic summit, you get 35, 40 presenters and everybody's talking and teaching and stuff. And one year, Dave Asprey was my keynote speaker for the event. And for those people that don't know Dave, he has a goal to live to 180 years old. Has a podcast, super famous guy, very
Bulletproof
wealthy.
coffee guy, right?
Bulletproof coffee guy, yeah. And he's all into longevity, right? And he has access to everything. So the nootropics and the cryogenics and the stem cell therapy and the, blah, 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 blah. I think somebody told me his monthly supplement bill is like $14,000 or something a month. I'm like, that's insane. But so you would say, why would Dave Asprey be at a homegrown food summit? Like, and I said, I'll tell you why. Is almost every centenarian who has ever been, studied, interviewed, or whatever, and the kind of centenarian you want to be, not the one with the oxygen tank in bed being propped up by whatever. I'm talking about the kind that are still vibrant and clear in the mind and active and doing stuff and engaged in doing meaningful work, right? They all grew or had access to homegrown food. It's the foundation, right? You have got to have nutrient dense, fresh, beautiful food to nurture your body. That's what your body needs and wants. And Dave Asprey himself has a 12-acre homestead. I'm pretty sure he's not doing most of the work, but he has his own homegrown food supply. So it's that important. I'm training in jiu-jitsu. I turned 60 this year. And, I'm training with all these guys, and they're like, Marjory, a jiu-jitsu black belt at a minimum is 10 years. And I'm like, yeah. Like, you think you'll be doing this when you're 70? And I said, yeah.
And
I feel and the 80s. I'm like, if you take care of the human body, I believe the natural, I don't know about 180, I don't probably, but the natural lifespan for a human body is 120. But you aren't going to get there eating the commercial food. You really aren't. So you need to grow your own food. And as I was saying, it's, for me, I got into it out of a crisis in my own personal life. And I've certainly been in a lot better position since then, but I will never stop because it's just so enjoyable and so fulfilling and so rewarding. And the nourishment, I don't, you can't buy anywhere the kind of food that I grow in my backyard. A lot of them are heirloom varieties that just flat on aren't available. A lot of other stuff, even if they're small commercial farmers, and God bless them, they need to be around. They can't put the kind of nutrients and time and energy into the food that I can. It's kind of like homeschooling your kids. You are going to do the best job homeschooling your kids just because you love them and you have the highest motivation to see them succeed. So, yeah, it's good stuff. So we're in the fall right now, and we are about to face, I believe this is World War III. They're started. It looks very orchestrated. They'll do their ups and downs, and they'll pretend to have a peace accord, and then they'll slip up and somebody will bomb something. It's going to go, there's a narrative, right? That's the way these things roll. And you're right. The price of oil is very, very likely to go insane, which is going to cause inflation for everything. And we'll get to blame it all in the Middle East. But let's focus on what you can do. And having food stored, a year's worth of food at least, is a really, really, really good idea. and right now it's the fall, there's a harvest. So a lot of times you can pick stuff up. Like you can go to local farmers and say, hey, I want to buy 10 cases of tomatoes, or I want to pick this, and then you can can them and have your own tomato sauce, or, go buy, like you were talking about, go buy a quarter of a cow or a half a cow. I used to always buy a half a cow because I was feeding my kids in most of the neighborhood when I was living in Texas. Put it in the freezer. There's a lot of things you can do that doesn't involve, and those backup food buckets, my goodness, those things are awesome, right? I'm not dissing them, but there's a lot of other ways to get much higher quality food.
Yeah, could I throw something in there? Because we live pretty close to the Amish farm here, and right now all their pumpkins and squash are coming in. And I'll tell you, from last year, we bought a bunch of butternut squash that we did not eat, but it held for like 8 months. And what we didn't eat at this time, when we had sheep before we gave them to our neighbor, because he has much more pasture space than we do, that's fenced in. I mean, we have more actual land space, but it's not fenced in. We've got more fenced in pasture space. So we would cut it up in real small chunks, because you just can't throw it out there and expect sheep to eat it. You got to really cut it up and dice it so they can get it and munch on it. But they loved it. And even, 8-month-old butternut squash that had been stored up through the winter still survived. And then we had white pumpkins also that survived, about 9 months. And that was just at storing room temperature, in a cooler, darker place, that we were able to keep them, make sure the skins don't touch, of course. But yeah, freezing things, frozen probably 50 pounds of apples, because I quartered them off, got the cores out, and they just kept the quarter sides and just put them in bags and throw them in the freezer, because doing juices with that, there's an enormous amount of things you can do with frozen apples at the end, but you're not going to get them in wintertime. But they do store well. The ones that are really crisp will generally store pretty well through the winter as well. So, I mean, this is a great time. There's so much produce coming out right now. So what's your favorites to freeze then?
I went, sorry, just riff for a second. I went to spend time with the Tarahumara Indians, the long distance runners that live in the Sierra Madres. And I went there to learn how they grew food. Like I went to this one, 10-acre plot that this family had been growing corn on every year, year after year, growing the same crop of corn. And I was like, how are they doing that? Anyway, they had a house that one Sensio had built himself, and a big bed that they all slept in. And underneath of it was all the pumpkins, all the calabasas, all the squashes, and that's just exactly what they had their food supply underneath the bed. They had a pretty simple one-room home that they lived in, but there were the squashes. So going back to freezing, I jump around a lot. Hope you all are good with that. It's the nature of an intuitive person, apparently. I think let's address the first thing. Most people are freaked out, like, oh my God, what happens if the electric goes out? And I'm like, you know what? The electric goes out here. I live in Puerto Rico. It goes out here almost every week. It's not a big deal. First of all, keep your freezer full all the time. If you don't have it full of, meat and whatever, take some gallon jugs of water and put it in there. And the thermal mass, when first, and the other thing is, on my freezers, I have just custom built like a 1/2-inch thick, what is that, PVC board, and I just put that on top. It's white and it looks nice, so it's aesthetically pleasing, and it just adds another layer of insulation. And then if it looks like the electric is going to be out for a long time, you throw some blankets on there and don't open it. It'll be fine for even a week. You don't have to freak out just because the power's out. And most of these freezers are pretty high efficiency these days, so even just a solar panel and a small inverter, and you can, keep that thing juiced up whenever the sun is going during the day. So you don't have to freak out about a freezer, I don't think. Also on the logistics of freezers, I really prefer having, I have 2 of them active, but I'm going to have 3 freezers, and I like them in the 4 or 5 cubic foot size. They're a little bit smaller. They're the chest size. You want the chest freezers because cold goes down and they're way more efficient as a chest freezer. And I never could do the whole dating and organizing stuff like that. Like that just does not work for me. So the way I do it is very simple. I fill up one freezer and then I start filling up another, and then I work out of the first one. And when the first one's empty, then I go to the second one. I swap back and forth. And that way I don't ever have to worry about dates. I just go from, just rotate between the 2. And as I said, I've got a third one I'm just about to start filling up. Another concept about freezers is the most difficult things to produce in your backyard or on a small homestead is going to be fat and then protein. After that, carbohydrates, and then of course there's tons and tons of fiber everywhere. So the things that have priority in my freezer are fat. And it's a little bit hard to store fats long term. Like most of your oils will go rancid in 6 months to 12 months. But so I'll put butter in the freezer, or you can put oils in the freezer. There aren't many oils that are actually that good for you, but you can put them in the freezer and they will last for years. So but fat really is, you think about your garden, like, do you have any fatty vegetables in there? No, you don't have any fatty vegetables, but fat's what makes things feel good. It makes it delicious. I also, when I went to Cuba in 2012 to interview the survivors of their government. So don't you love these names? They called it the special period. Actually, it was just an economic collapse, basically. And one of the women was talking to me, and she said, yeah, people's skin and their faces, they all started to turn gray, and their skin got all flaky because we had no fats, no oils, nothing. And when you don't have that you look really, it's really horrible for your body. So fats are vitally important, and they're the most, they're going to be the most expensive, but they're calorically dense, so it's a good thing to store. So and then protein, high quality protein. Again,
We
pick
can
up a
fish, like, around Cuba, there's got to be an enormous amount of fish. Like, people couldn't go to the sea and spearfish or get something themselves, or use wander offshore and get some, shellfish or something like that, huh?
They
That's
did end up doing that. And interestingly enough, what often happened was, like, the person who was the lowly gardener and like the lowest socioeconomic person in the community, who was working for their lawyer or their doctor, like that whole switched. Like the gardeners, or the more of the humble or landscape type people, became the community leaders or the neighborhood leaders, as people said, wait a minute, we need to figure this out. And they did. But the thing about Cuba was it happened overnight. Like when the last Soviet ship left the harbor, then that was it. Like, I mean, in no time at all, the whole GDP had just dropped by 60%. The lights went out, the water stopped running. It happened really, really, really fast. And in that period, the average Cuban lost about 20 pounds. And fortunately, though, that they were in a tropical climate, and there were enough people with the old skills. They had completely sacrificed everything, though, to grow sugar to sell to the Soviet Union. So they'd lost a lot, but they had enough people and enough seeds. But it does take a little, it takes some months, it takes some time to get things going. But in any time of crisis, backyard food production is the thing that everybody reverts to, just because your government's not going to help you.
Yeah, and you mentioned something, it seems like a lot of this is orchestrated and planned right now to collapse the economy and bring it back up under the Bank for International Settlements. They're trying to pull out their unified ledger now by digitizing 100% of assets across the planet, including your home, your car, whatever, under their ledger, and then they'll put stipulations in on how it can be used, etc. So that's their ultimate plan. They've just released that this week. But
wow,
coming into the winter scares me a little bit, because if all this was happening in the spring, I would be a little bit like, okay, but we got the whole summer, we can grow food, and the lambs are coming in, calves are coming on. We got we can work this out in 6 months, still growing food and trading with the neighbors and get the meat and everything. But now we are coming into this harvest shall be done pretty soon. And, if it comes into December, January, February, you're not growing anything. Even if you have a greenhouse, you're going to need to keep that thing heated. How are you going to heat it? Wood, yeah. But I mean, I'm blessed to be on a farm where it doesn't matter. Neighbors don't complain if you burn wood. Almost everybody has wood burning stoves out here for, their heat source. But if you get into a city or a neighborhood or some kind of suburb, they're going to complain if you're burning wood, to keep warm, or even try to do anything with that. It's all electric based. So coming into the winter adds a whole new dimension and to it of complexity, because you can't really grow much. And then again, that slow, put the seeds in, it doesn't grow as fast because it's, coming into the spring, it's not a full, sprint while it's growing. we're trying to turn over and get our autumn garden in this week. So, you know, the spinaches and the was that mustard greens and kohlrabi and the beets and all these kind of things we're putting in now, extra lettuce, different kinds of lettuce. But that, again, you know, that's just going to be roughage for a better term. So what do you feel about the timing on all this to bring us into this conflagration? I guess that's the word to use, during the winter time, so people will be pinched on what they can grow.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. You know, like, I mean, are they devising this for the maximum amount of pain? Probably.
Don't know.
I don't know. You know, if you did it in the springtime anyway, I don't know if most people in the city would be able to get their act together enough to do it. I mean, you and I could. We're resilient. We're in the country. We know, but I don't think it would have mattered too much for people in the city. They're you know. There is one thing that people can do right now that is a food production source, and that's backyard chickens. And I will say, for people who live in apartments or condominiums, quail are another option. They're like little bitty chickens. Anyway, I'll talk about chickens, and we can riff on quail also. But you know, one laying hen will lay about 250 eggs a year, and you do need to keep her warm. And she's not going to produce as much in the winter months, but they will produce. And you know, I always say a flock of 6 laying hens, that's 25, I'm sorry, that's 1,500 eggs a year, you know, 250 eggs times 6. So that's 3 egg omelets for breakfast every morning. That's your breakfast every morning. And an egg, despite all the cholesterol news and dis news and whatever information on it, it's actually a whole food. It's a complete food. And it's a very healthy food, you know, full of protein and fat, actually. So, I don't know if you remember what the price of a laying hen went up to, and when the 2020 COVID experience started to roll out, but you know, you can get laying hens now for $20, $25 a piece. That's not much, you know. Build them a coop, get that set up, store some feed, go get some metal garbage cans and store. So it's still chicken feed, right? It's still cheap as chicken feed, you know, so you can get them through it, and have yourself some fresh eggs happening on a regular basis.
Because you talk about that on your webinar too, on how to set up the quailing thing. Like, we've lost 6 to 8 laying hens just from raccoons and pests, and our dogs killed a couple because they got outside the fence, and then dogs were pinning them down when they were trying to put their heads back in. They couldn't get back up enough. So we've lost an enormous amount of birds too. So we're always on this treadmill of bringing new birds up, because, you know, so many are getting taken by other means, until we got the raccoon proofness and started spraying vinegar around. As a, you know, by the way, vinegar is it's like tear gas for raccoons. You spray a little vinegar around there using like just a regular spray bottle, they'll stay away. And then, you know, getting more raccoon proof with different kind of gauge fencing and different size spacing on the fence so they can't get in. Otherwise, it's a learning curve.
Yeah. Chicken wire isn't meant to protect your chickens. It's meant to keep your chickens out of your garden. Right. I have actually seen raccoons rip chicken fence apart. So you do need, it's solid. I've also seen them dig underneath. So the general guideline is you need to dig underneath or have a skirt wide enough that if the raccoon's paw can't go all the way through it, they generally don't dig any deeper than that. But raccoons are astonishing creatures. I had one of the things I love is those game cameras that can be up all night watching your coop for you. Mm-hmm. It's just some amazing footage of what goes by chicken coop at night. And you're absolutely right. You have to build like a little miniature military installation to keep your chickens safe. I have dogs that protect the chickens. I don't have a problem. If I have the ASPCA would probably go ape shit, but you can train a dog not to eat chickens. You got to be rough. And I've had some people go, "Oh my God, that's so rough." I'm like, no, have you ever seen an older dog disciplining a younger dog? I said, that's harsh. Like, I cannot even come close.
You just think like, oh man, you got to call the police, break them up.
You know? Right. I can't even come close to being that harsh, but you do have to be harsh, and you can train them to not, you know. Actually, I had this wonderful dog, farm dog, and she is half Pyrenees, which I like that breed. They're a very good livestock guardian breed. And she is half breed, which I like. I also like mixed breeds because anyway, I wanted to be a little small, not the big, you know, full Pyrenees, or you almost can put a saddle on them. Let me riff on the size of protection dogs, by the way. I like the medium-sized dogs, partly because And I have two of them, right? Because I want them to be a pack. Yes, I'm definitely the alpha, but they are a pack. If you have one dog, then it's a family pet, right? If you have two dogs, they're working dogs. They don't come in the house. That's their job, is to be up all night, guarding the chickens and guarding, running off the deer and doing the stuff. They actually really enjoy that. That's their thing. And I want two of them medium sized because I got to feed the dogs, right?
Yeah.
So I had two, and really from the butchering scraps and excess eggs, miscellaneous scraps that we had, and then what they could scrounge around, hunting gophers or snakes or whatever they could find, an occasional raccoon. I never had to feed the dogs, right? In fact, feeding dogs is only a concept that came into being in the last, I don't know, 30 or 40 years. The whole concept of dog food, 50 years ago or 100 years ago, is like, you gotta be crazy. Nobody's gonna feed their dog, like the dogs just feed themselves, right? And if you set your systems up, that'll be that way. But I don't want to have huge dogs, because then you are going to have to feed the dog, or you'll have to figure out the more. And then, but if they're too small, then they got to be able to handle that raccoon, right? And so my dogs, they could definitely handle a raccoon, and they were scary enough that most coyotes and or even packs of coyotes would run off. And if they ran into a pack of pigs or something like that came up, then they would start barking, and I would know to wake up and, get the rifle or the shotgun and go out there. And a lot of times, actually, I never had to shoot anything, just my physical human scent, and the pigs would run off. So, I knew every now and then I was going to have to get up in the middle of the night when there was something the dogs couldn't handle. But, that's a pretty good trade-off for most of the time, them taking care of everything. But dogs, I think, are invaluable for running things off, and for protecting the homestead. They're way better than humans, honestly. You got a couple of good farm dogs.
People can sneak up on you too, and different things can sneak in. You're only human. I mean, even if you have cameras all around your property, you're going to stay up 24 hours a day? No. So even if like you saw people walking in your camera, a chance of you maybe being asleep or cooking dinner or using the bathroom or something, then what? But dogs are, so our two dogs are about 40 to 60 pounds. And like I say, it's that medium range, not too big. And they're actually, smaller than you think. We say 40, 50-pound dog. You're like, oh, that must be giant. They're not really that big, comparatively to like Pyrenees, where you're like, come here, so.
Put the saddle on that dang thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, dogs are awesome. And and they're also good for human protection also. Your yard is protected by a dog. You're going to know. What's another really good alert animal is a goose.
Yeah, we have geese this year. We got 3 geese, Pyrenees, and they're loud. Oh my, they're loud.
I was real. Oh, they sure are, and they're obnoxious. I used to tease folks and say they reminded me so much of my teenage son, just loud and obnoxious. But I kept them. I had an acre fenced, and I had a orchard food forest thing going on in there, and I kept them in there, and they loved it. And put a couple pans of water out under a tree for them in the morning, and they would go in there and they'd do their goose activities, and that water would be disgusting. And by the next day I would dump that water out, which the tree loved. I mean, that's like fertilizer. And I'd move the pans to the next tree, and that's how I fertilized the whole orchard. And geese are kind of like little bitty cows. They are, they just like grazing. They're kind of like grass and forbs. They're not real big on, like ducks will eat insects, and ducks might want more protein type stuff and grain type stuff, but geese are more, they're like little herbivores. So, but they are super, super, back in the day, I used to try to sneak up on the animals, just practicing, my kids, we were always doing crazy stuff. And I could sneak up on the dogs from time to time, but you will never sneak up on a goose. You just will. And I'd read in the Middle Ages, and throughout, maybe it was the Dark Ages, that oftentimes the little hole by the house, as often as it was filled with a dog, they would have used geese as alarms for somebody's coming. So they're fun, but they are loud. The reason I had them was I could keep them out away from the house in that orchard, and it was because the family would have gone nuts having the geese around.
We've gotten turkeys now as well.
Oh
So we
yeah,
have four turkeys.
go. Yeah,
Yeah,
go.
and they're about 15 pounds each now, and they grow incredibly fast. So you go from a little bird to something, boom, like walking around. Remember the old Bugs Bunny cartoons where that kind of brown turkey's walking around and they had that sort of flared out thing that they were using
Yeah.
back in the 1600s or whatever. But those kind of original heirloom turkeys that we got, not the white ones for meat bird that they do factory, but the original heirloom. And we bought four of them at Rural King, and we thought we had, at least three females and one male, but they all turned out to be four males.
Yeah,
But
right.
again,
Yeah.
they follow you around and they're quite alarming. If something new is around, they also start squawking, but they're not nearly as loud and robust as anything else like the guinea fowl or the geese. It's all about, because our neighbor is the guy, we gave our sheep away because we just didn't have enough space. And even though we had, a couple acres fenced in the front, as soon as we let them out, what did they go for? They had 2 acres to graze on, nice grass, all these things. What did they go for? They went for all the wine vines around the fence and just ate them all. And I was like, oh no.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so our vines are recovering, but we're like, hey, my neighbor's he's got a whole bunch of different he's doing rotational grazing, so he's got all these different fence plots set up.
Hmm.
We're like, can
Yeah,
you take these? Can you take them? We'll harvest one, when it comes time. But for right now, we got nowhere to, and they're going to be, they just nibble everything down. And there was like almost eating roots because the area we were keeping them. And then they let them out another time. And then what they do, they went for all the rose bushes and trampled everything down, ate it, just broke everything, smashed it to the ground. They're destructive, in their eating habits. And
I had that same experience with goats,
oh, you did?
Actually,
Okay.
yeah, we were at the time we were homesteading in Central Texas, and honestly, goats are a far superior animal for Texas than cattle because they eat everything, and there's a lot of really harsh lands in Texas, and goats do much better on it than cattle. Cattle actually need, reasonably nice forage, right? Anyway, I had the goats for about 3 weeks, and I realized that the goats and I were in competition for my edible landscaping. Because if they got out, they were immediately going for the grapes or the kiwi vine or the garden. And I just said, you know what, and you got to have really good fences to keep goats in, and they're adorable. You go visit somebody else's place, and they're really funny, and they're just wonderful animals. But man, they were too much. I'm like, I want something a lot calmer. I kind of just can't handle these guys. So we had cabrito. And I said, okay, I'm not. That's another thing. Actually, was it Carla Emerson in the book? There's this wonderful book on the Encyclopedia of Country Living. Just a classic, great book to have in your library. And she was talking about different personalities do better with different livestock. And like there's cattle people and there's goat people and there's sheep people. And I truly believe that. And I found out I was not a goat person. Not at all.
Well, we were trying to
I
split tasks. Like, okay, my neighbor over there, he's getting a cow, he's got goats. Now he's got like 8 sheep over there. So he's sort of the animal husbandry, person because he's got everything fenced in. Where we've become sort of the bird people because we got the geese, we got the turkeys, we got ducks now too. We got 4 ducks, and then we got all these chickens. So it's kind of like we split tasks on the animals or the fowl because we're getting, much more knowledgeable at keeping those things alive. Even ryegrass, mixing in with the scratch grains and then some layer pellets. So just like any kind of things that we can find that'll be on sale for grains that would be seed grains. We can buy a couple 100 pounds of that and for nothing, and then add it into their mix. So we kind of find out which birds like which kind of grains, and then we can sort of adjust the diets for each section, whether it's turkey section, chicken section. We got the geese and the ducks run together as a flock of 7. They just kind of cruise around together, but everybody's got their own taste. So we're kind of another thing, buying food at a store like a Rural King or some kind of, farm store, farm co-op, those things are specifically set to market to you for a certain price point for 50 pounds of something like layer pellets or whatnot. But farmers, when they come out and they're pulling tons and tons literally off their fields, you can get it for nothing, or even sometimes to give it to you. You're going to get a bargain on that, especially if you know them. So it's really helpful to know your farmers around that are doing different types of grains. And now back to your webinar here. We got off track on the quails, but quails, which we don't have quail yet. So what's the production rate of quail egg protein source versus chicken egg? Because, obviously the quail are smaller. So approximately how many quail to equal one laying hen? And then what's the production? If the quail are going to lay 1 egg a day, there's 3 of them and it takes 3 to equal 1. I mean, are you getting the same protein production out? Because you talked about this in your webinar, which you can find, by the way, going to Homegrown 2030.
Yeah, go to homegrown2030.com. And, I just really summarize a simple 3-part system to grow. And I go through the calories and the time and what it looks like. And I show you that you can grow half of your own food in a pretty small backyard space. So that's at the webinar. So yeah, you pretty much nailed it. It's about three quail eggs to a chicken egg. They are higher in protein and higher in nutrient density. Their yolks are bigger relative to the whites. And they do require a higher protein feed source. But I've grown them, and then I just recently set up a friend last year. I set her up, she's got a small house. She wants, some protein sources. And so I set her up with a quail cage in the living room. And I mean, you can have it in an apartment, you do have to, you're going to have to do hygiene on that every day, because otherwise you're going to have quail smells. But they're actually kind of like a pleasant little song, and they're not, I wouldn't say song, but they're kind of chirping, and it's not loud or obnoxious or annoying. And if you do keep it clean, every day you got compost happening. They're totally compatible with living in your living room. And she has, I think she's got 10 of them or 12 of them at any given time. So she's producing the equivalent of 3 or 4 eggs a day with the quail. Now she's buying commercial feed for them. And so, yeah, you do have to get a little bit higher protein feed. But one thing we're starting to explore is how can we raise insects off of other food scraps or other food wastes that, we're not using, and turn that into high protein feed. And that's actually a thing here. And I'm living in the tropics now, so I'll use this in mango season, which happened, around July over the summer. We have and this will happen to any of you that have a fruit tree. You just got so much fruit, right? And some of my trees are like 30 feet tall. There's no way you're going to they land, bam, you got half the fruit's good and half smashed. Like, what do you do with all of this fruit? And so we're looking at how do we create worm bins with that, or how do we raise black soldier fly with that, or how do we distill it into alcohol, which is a very useful trade item. How do you use the surplus? And one of the things absolutely is black soldier fly that we would grow en masse during the season when there's this abundance, and then dry the soldier fly larvae for being able to feed at other times when we don't have anything. So crickets, mealy, oh my good, if you can ever if you get some mealyworms, man, your chickens will love you.
Oh, those are expensive now. That's crazy how expensive they are.
Oh my God, but chickens love them. Like, I mean, it's like the best for chickens. They love mealyworms. They're not that hard to grow, but so there are ways to produce feed for your livestock, off of, like, even if you got an apple tree, there's a bunch of apples you don't get, right? Just because they got something in them, or they dropped, or whatever, so, or it's hard to harvest, or it's hard to use up a whole apple tree's worth of apples. So to come up with other ways to use that, which takes us back to, so we talked about freezing, and that's the simplest thing, honestly. Oh my God, one year I was living in Colorado. I lived there a couple of years and had this apricot tree. It was so delicious. I've never eaten I'd never liked apricots because I'd only had stuff in the grocery store. And when I had my own tree, I was like, oh, this is what this fruit is for, and they were so great because you could just put your thumb in the seam, pop out the seed and toss it in a bag and put it in the freezer. It's fantastic. It was super easy. So freezing, we've gone through that. Let's go into canning, which is another great way to preserve food. I mean, there's nothing like looking in your pantry and seeing rows of quart-sized mason jars full of green beans and carrots and whatever. Tomato sauce. I don't do a ton of canning, but for green beans and tomato sauce, and then also fermented foods, absolutely, I love canning. We'll do that. I also find, and canning is a great thing to do with other people. There's a story one time, a farmer, they were getting this greenhouse operation up and running. And you know how when you're starting a new business, either you have too much or too little, and it's hard to manage inventory with suppliers and sales, and he happened to have a whole whole trailer full of fresh, organic, greenhouse grown tomatoes. And he said, Marjorie, could you do something with this? And I said, give me 5 minutes. And so I called just 2 other neighbors. And in 15 minutes, we'd organized, we'd gotten the cans together and the burner and the gas and the stuff. And I said, yeah, bring the trailer by and we'll fix that up. And the next day it was 3 families, so 6 adults. And I don't know what we had, 6 or 7 kids running around. And it was just one of the most enjoyable days I've had in a long time, where, someone might be cleaning the jars and somebody's chopping apples and somebody's stirring it on the pot. And then, we all just traded jobs. And sometimes when you're tired of that, you hold the baby and pass the baby around, or the kids are always playing hide and go. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful day. And then at the end of it, everybody had like 4 or 5 cases of, shut that off, tomato sauce. So I really like doing canning with other people. And when you get a big abundance of stuff, water bath canning, if you're afraid of it, that's the first one to start with. It's really pretty simple. People have been doing it for, I don't know, a century at least, if not more. Pressure canning is the one that everybody's afraid of, because you got that your pressure, right? I like the All-American canner, it's this big aluminum thing, and it doesn't have any gasket, so that you never have to worry about replacement parts. And I've had that thing now for 20 years, and I am sure that my grandchildren will be using that exact same canner. So it's just solid. It's going to last forever. And again, you don't need any replacement parts for it.
And that's another thing, Marjorie, that they've scared us with, is how many stories of, oh, you barely even touch it, it's going to blow up and scald you, and the whole family gets scalded. Never touch that thing. Aunt Gertrude got scalded, and that's the whole thing that they've been feeding us with, is those pressure canners are so dangerous. How dare you even have one in your house? It is just a disaster waiting to happen. Don't even do it. To get people to go away from canning. I swear to you, we look at these things that have been put forth toward us to get us back into the consumptive model of, you can only get it at the grocery store. You can it at home. You're just waiting for a family member to end up in the burn unit or something. Don't even take the chance.
You can believe they're now trying to make us all afraid of gas stoves. I'm like, what?
Yeah, right. I mean, I use it. Yeah, so I never even knew one person in my whole life, not even a friend of a friend, that had like anything ever happen with their gas stoves. Never.
Yeah. And nobody likes cooking on an electric stove, like.
Oh, I don't like it either. It's too.
Yeah, it's
it doesn't
terrible.
cook even.
I know. We really live some incredibly insane times. It just really is. I just laugh, because what else are you going to do? It's just crazy. But yeah, canning is it's a skill everybody's done. By the way, a while ago, oh my God, was it the USDA or FDA or somebody? They decided that the lids on the cans, when you're doing your own canning, that it has an expiration date of, like, those lids are only good. The stuff you can is only going to be good for like 18 months or something like that. I'm like, that is ridiculous. People have been canning for decades, and we have those lids, and I've personally had stuff that I've canned and didn't get around to eating it for a couple of years, and it was fine, I promise you. I've also, I spent some time with this woman named Jackie Chan. I'm not sure if she's still active anymore, but about a decade ago, she was real big in the prepper space, and she canned like crazy. She loved canning, and that was kind of her thing. She taught people how to can. And I asked her about those. There's these Tatler canning lids that are reusable. I said, Jackie, what do you think? She said, those are great. They are great. So I haven't used them much myself, but I do have a stash of them, because, right now I'm going to use the other ones, right? But the lids are the thing, that they aren't reusable. I mean, once you've used them, you do not want to reuse them again, but they don't expire. They don't expire in a year and a half. So, you can and it's going to be fine. It's another one of those, like what you were talking about, vinegar a little while ago.
Or salt. They put expiration dates on salt now. Come on, man. It's a mineral from the earth that's millions of years old, and you put an expiration date.
You put an expiration date on salt. Oh God, I haven't seen that one. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, there's expiration dates on salt now.
Yeah. Canning's also, it's a pretty simple skill to learn. It really is. Just go do it. It's not hard. We actually have when you go to the webinar at the end of it, we'll make you an offer to get, there's a book and the academy we have, and in there we have a whole bunch of training on how to do both water bath and pressure canning. Beautifully videoed with a lovely homesteader named Kendra. She just did a really good job of it. So again, I don't do a ton of it, but I do enough regularly just to keep the skill active. And then I swear I love canned green beans. I actually almost like them better than fresh, right? And tomato sauce. Oh my God, you cannot buy tomato sauce like the tomato sauce you make yourself. It's so incredibly good. So well worth it. Also, I did enjoy, I would do pressure canning occasionally of stew. Like I take, beef and carrots and potatoes and make a little stew out of it and then pressure can that and have it in quart-sized jars of them. And that was just because that's almost like fast food. Because all you'd have to do is open the can, heat it up, and boom, you got a meal, right? So I would do that for those, times when whatever's going wrong in the day and you've got kids looking at you, Mom, what's for dinner? And I'm like, guess what? Beef stew.
Again.
Again, you're right.
Anyway.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of changes, and it's not going to ever go back to, whatever we think now is. It's never going to go back, because when you destroy that much, infrastructure, when you destroy that much production, it takes a long time to get that going. It's just not going to bounce back like magically. There'll be food, we're going to have a 7-month war, and then it'll all be, and then it's not. That's when we're going to be into what that reality is. And it's going to be here for a while. So
get ready now, because COVID shifted our lives so greatly too. Now you can see the shift. Like if you look at it post now, since we're finished with that whole chapter, like the promises were we'll go back to the normal. Like you look at the world now and that has completely shifted, and it is a distant memory in the past, and it's never going to return to the way it was. Things keep constricting more and more. So, this is kind of I wouldn't even say warning, but a good conversation to have to present a few ideas. Now today we just went through a small percentage of our list that we had talked about earlier. So I hope Marjory will be kind enough to join me again for some of these discussions, continuing on the preps and different phases of it. But today I really hope you got some value out of our conversation, and thank you for sticking around to the end. I'll put that link below for homegrown2030.com so you can access the free, like I say, free webinar. Jump on there, a full hour and a half of not only that, but you got the videos on there and how-tos, and it's very visual on how you can build things and walk through that whole preparation step from the raised gardens to the chickens and everything visual, compared to us just describing it with words here. So
yeah, there's a lot of
last
images.
thoughts?
No, just please get ready. And David, I love your channel. I'm like an avid subscriber. I recommend it to everybody, and I really appreciate the information that you've been bringing forward. But it is a warning. And everybody needs to get prepared, because this is it. We're in it.
Yeah, because somebody was saying the other day, well, this will probably die down and then we'll have to wait for something bigger to come up. And I'm like, this seems like it's it. Like I can't see it dying down and then getting to the same level of disruption across the planet to cause this same level of disruption. I just can't see it dying down and then it goes peaceful again for a year or two, and then we come back to the same level of disruption. Like they're all in right now. Everything's 100% all in. So just put that in a frame of reference. It's not going to pop out, get stable, and then they're going to go at it again. This is the chapter to reset the monetary system is the base goal of this. Consolidate land and consolidate all assets on the planet under one consolidated. And again, I'll talk about unified ledger here with the Bank for International Settlements, but I really think that this is where it's going to. We might look at foes on the other side, but I think they're just as involved, because everybody needs a reset, including China. They need it worse than we do. So you might think it's a foe, and it's all really a stage play, in my opinion. So I'll leave it there.
All righty. We'll talk to you later. Yeah, let's do another one next month.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. Bye for now.
We'll talk then. All right. Bye.